So, let me start off by saying that for the last 4 months, God has been working in my life dramatically. Uh, for sure, it has changed me from the inside out. Um, it all began around mid June when I started to get sick. Um, it started with a random pain in my stomach, lower abdominal area. Um, it started as a small pain and then gradually grew into something that was unbearable. I couldn't take the pain. Um, so I went to go visit an urgent care. And when I was there, the doctor kind of did a quick evaluation, kind of listened to what I was saying, and gave me medication. So I went home and took the medication for about a week. After taking the medication, it didn't really do anything for me. I was still feeling sick. I was having the symptoms, if not any worse. It was starting to get worse. Um, and that's how it all started. That's how God started working in my life. Um, so I started to visit emergency rooms occasionally, maybe 2 to 3 times out of the week, because the pain wouldn't go away. It was just there. It would not go away. Any day I can take medication, pain medication, but it was still there. It wasn't going away. And every single time I would go into the hospital, uh, the doctors would just tell me there's nothing wrong with you. Your blood work comes back normal, and your CT scans look normal. Uh, so I started to really question my life, and I was really starting to get worried about my health, because at that point nobody can really give me answers. At least I thought the answers that I was looking for. Um, so I can't remember this one occasion. I can't forget. I'm sorry. I can't forget this one occasion when my wife and I we were about to get to work, because during this time I had lost my job. I had lost a lot of finances. Um, so I was going through it, but we were blessed to have a contractor job through Amazon Flex. So me and my wife were heading that way that day, and I started to feel like my chest was compressing. I started to feel like my fingers were starting to cramp and started to feel real horrible. And at that point, I thought I was having a heart attack. So my wife quickly got off the freeway and she brought me into the hospital. I ran in there and I remember telling the nurse, I think I'm gonna die because I feel like my heart's about to stop. So, like any other emergency room, they brought me in real quick. The doctors were trying to get me stable. They were trying to hold me down on the bed, and I wasn't able to bring my arms down because my arms and my hands were cramping up so much towards the inside of my chest that I couldn't move. Um, so finally, they strapped me down. They got a heart monitor on me, and they're like, when you're a little bit more stable, we'll bring you into the CT room so you can have a CT scan done. And I remember sitting there and it was just me and God, because at this point my wife couldn't go inside because we had the kids in the car. And I remember just crying out to God and asking Him for help. Um, it was just me and Him. That's it. Everyone else who was my friends or anything like that, they weren't able to be there like God was. Um, so I remember laying on the bed, and I remember looking towards the edge of my bed, and I remember somebody coming to grab my bed. But I couldn't see this individual. I couldn't see his face. I couldn't see who it was. I could only see his hand grabbing the edge of my bed. And I asked him, I said, "Where are you taking me?" And he said, "Well, don't worry." He said, "We're going to take care of you. You're going to be okay. Nothing's going to happen to you." But during this whole time, I wasn't able to see his face. So they took me into CT scan. He carried me all the way from the emergency room to where the CT scan room was. This whole time I couldn't see his face. They brought me into CT scan. They scanned me, and I came right back out. I think I fell asleep. because they were doing so much tests and they were trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Um, so when I came out, I asked the two nurses who were there. I was like, "Where's the guy who brought me here? The tall, muscular guy that brought me here." And I think the biggest shock was when just two young ladies told me there was no guy who brought you here. It was us two. We brought you here. And they took me back to my room, and I sat there thinking to myself, am I going crazy? Or is this really happening to me? Because this is something that I've never experienced before. So I sat there, they gave me my medications, the doctor came back out, and he's like, well, there's nothing wrong with you other than it looks like, your intestines and your colon are swollen. And I said, okay. I said, so are we going to do anything today? He's all, no, we can't do anything for you. You have to go see your doctor. So I left that hospital, and I remember being in the car with my wife and telling her this story, and I was still shocked. To this day, it shocks me because I don't know. I can't say for sure who that was, but I know it was God in a way, either himself or he sent an angel just to take care of me. And this is how it all started. I started to see things happen in my life that I had never seen before. So I went home and, still going through the pain, not understanding, not knowing what was wrong with me. But for sure, when I went back home that day, it was different because I had experienced something it wasn't from this world. It was more of a spiritual experience for me. So I started to really question my life. I really started questioning myself. Am I really doing what God is asking me to do? Or am I doing what I'm doing because it brings happiness to me, but it's not what God is asking me to do? So, went back home, continued seeing doctors. So a urologist, he couldn't figure out what was wrong with me other than just give me pain medication and medication for an infection that wouldn't show up on the blood because there was no bacteria, there was nothing. They just kept giving me medication. Finally, after a few weeks of going back and forth to the hospital, I was able to see a specialist gastroenterologist. He of course, the very first thing he wanted to do was to check to see if I had cancer. So I remember him telling me, we're going to do this procedure. We're going to try to find out if you have cancer in your colon or if anything like that is happening in your stomach. But for the next 4 weeks, I had to wait for my results. But there was still no definite answers, And I started to question myself. I started to really ask myself, is this the right people that I'm asking the question to, or am I just asking because I don't know who to ask this question to? So I started to really dig myself into scripture, and I started to really listen to other people who testify of God's miracles. And, I started going to church. I started to turn my life around. But I was still going through pain. I was still going through medical issues. I can honestly say during that time, the only people who were there for me was God, my wife, and my parents. It was a very lonely place. But I realized that to be able to understand what God wants to do in your life, he has to pull you away from everything that you've done before, friends, family, everyone. He just pulled me away. I realized that when God wants to work in your life, he has to pull you away from your old self. And I started to realize that in this process of being sick, from the beginning of June, here we are in August, and they still can't find out what's wrong with me. I realized that during this whole time, God had been with me from the very beginning, and I started to understand that the real question was not for the doctors or for anybody else. The real question was for God. He wanted me to ask him something, So one day in the shower, I was showering and I was thinking about my family. I was thinking about my kids, and I just literally just gave my life to Christ there. It wasn't nothing fancy, nothing flashy. I just say, God, I need you. I need you more than anything in my life right now. And I gave my life to Christ there. And I asked him to forgive me of everything that I had ever done in my life. All the bad stuff, or even the stuff that I thought was good because it wasn't of God. I asked him for forgiveness. And continued waiting for, still waiting for the doctor to give me a result. Finally, they called me and, they said, we're going to go ahead and give you your results. We need you to come in on this day. So we went in, and, I was still kind of scared to find out what was wrong with me. Even though I wanted to know, I was still scared. The doctor came out, and, I remember just sitting there and telling God, I was like, I'm ready for whatever you want me to go through. Because at this point, I've been suffering for the last few months already, that anything that hits me is just, what else to expect? So I said, whatever you want me to go through, I'm going to do it. The doctor came out and he's like, well, I have good news for you. He said, you don't have cancer. Did a biopsy. So you're good on that. But you do have a bacteria in your stomach. And you also have ulcers. He said, so we're going to treat that. And we're going to treat it with medication, and hopefully that gets you better. I went home. The whole way home, I was thinking to myself, I was thinking the worst. I thought they were going to tell me that I was going to die. I thought they were going to tell me that my life was over and I was going to have to say bye to everyone, but it's not what God wanted. He wanted something different with me. So I went home, started taking my medication. And about 2 or 3 days after that, I remember waking up that day and my joints, all of my joints in my fingers, in my arms, my legs, I had like severe gout attacks like on every joint in my body. And I just didn't understand why, because I've had gout attacks before, but not like that, and I was in a lot of pain. I started to have pain like in my prostate area, in my arms, my legs. My head was hurting all the time. I couldn't move my neck. Most of the time I was like in bed, in bed just lying and looking at the ceiling and asking God like what he wanted to do with me, and still I had no answer from him, I was still there like, God, like, you're asking me to ask you something and you're not giving me a response, but I think it was just not the right time. God didn't want to give me the answer right then and there. And maybe about a few weeks after that is when I really got bad. Like, my body was breaking down. I had lost weight. I wasn't eating. There was like a lot of things that were happening with me, physically, mentally, spiritually, but I remember this going to Loma Linda because I was like, like, I've gone to all these doctors, I've gone to all these specialists, and this is my last resort. I said, here I'm going to go, and if they don't tell me anything, I'm done. I'm just going to let myself just get carried away and die. And I remember going into that Loma Linda. My wife drove me. It was like around 10 o'clock at night. And I got up to the front and I told the nurse, I said, these are my symptoms. This is what's going on with me. I said, I can't even move. I need someone to help me move this chair. Like, someone needs to push me around because I'm having a lot of pain in my legs everywhere. And the nurse looked at me and she said, well, it's going to be about 24 hours for you to be seen. And I looked at my wife and she's like, well, if it takes 24 hours to find out what's wrong with you, we're going to wait. So I remember walking into the lobby, sitting down, and I kind of like went to go sit far away from everybody because I didn't want anyone to see me the way I was, because I was really in a lot of pain. And I remember just bowing my head and telling God, I said, God, I said, I gave my life to you. Now I'm just asking you to help me. I'm in a lot of pain and you need to send somebody to help me because I don't think I can wait that long. And I sat there for about 20 minutes when the nurse came out running. She's like, Mario. Yeah, that's me. I'm gonna ask you 10 questions. I said, all right. He asked me questions. And he's like, well, I just want to let you know that you've been moved up on the list. You're on top now, so you should be seen soon. And I just had literally just finished asking God to do that for me. And I realized, I started to think to myself, I'm like, well, God is here. About 20 minutes after that, after the nurse asking me those 10 questions, I was sitting there waiting, and I still doubted. I was still doubting. I was still kind of like not knowing what was going to happen. So there comes the nurse 20 minutes after that, and she's like, we're gonna bring you inside now because we're gonna take your blood. And here I was at this hospital. They had just told me that I was gonna wait 24 hours to be seen. I sat in the lobby for about 15 to 20 minutes and I asked God for help. And there he was, delivering me from what I asked him to help me for. So they called us inside to the hospital, and I remember going into the room, and I seen a nurse come in, and then she went right back out real quick, and I told my wife, I'm like, man, she's working hard. I said, you can tell she's working hard. I said, so I'm not even gonna get upset that she's not taking me right now. I said, I'm just gonna wait, and we waited there for about 10 minutes, and finally the nurse comes out, and me and my wife were sitting there, and I was actually apologizing to her for a lot of things that I had done previous to the nurse walking in. I was telling her I was sorry for all the things that I had done and how I had treated her in the past. It was like a moment for me and her, and we were both crying because she was also scared. She didn't know what was happening to me. So the nurse comes in and she tells my wife, why are you crying? So my wife tells her, this is my husband. He's been sick for about almost 4 months now. Nobody gives us answers. We're here just to get answers. We're at a last point, And there was something displaying on the computer screen, and it caught my wife's eye. And the nurse turned around and looked at her, and she says, read what's on that screen. And the screen was kind of out in the lobby. So my wife started reading, and it went to Isaiah 41:10. And I'm gonna read it to you guys because this is where I felt my healing happen. It says, out of Isaiah 41:10, it says, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. That's exactly what happened to me as soon as I walked into that hospital. I walked in with fear, and he was there to greet me. And when I asked him for help, he was there to help me and ultimately uphold me with his righteous hand. So I started to cry, and I started to cry so much. And the nurse started to tell me that she was going to proceed to take out my blood. But she started to sing. And she started to sing that song by Chris Tomlin, Good, Good Father. And at this point, I had been poked so many times in my arms and my hands. I was just like, it was different because I didn't feel painful. It didn't feel like I was scared to give her my hand. Like, she was singing. When she was singing to me, it put me in a different state, calm. It calmed me down. So she started to talk to me, and she looked at me very serious while my wife was right there, and she said, a few months ago, my husband got sick. Same thing. Nobody knew what was happening with him. And ultimately, after seeing so many doctors, they diagnosed him with cancer. She goes, she looked at my wife and she told my wife, what I did during that time is, she goes, all I did was talk words of life into him. And anything that I would tell him was nothing but of life. She goes, don't you see what's happening here? She says, your husband has been selected to give testimonies of God's work. And when she said that to me, I got the chills. I didn't know what to say, what to do, not anything. I just sat there and I looked at her. And I realized that all this time, from the very beginning of June, or even before that, I was asking all these questions in the wrong direction. I wasn't asking them to the right person. And I realized that I went into that hospital asking for questions, but I got the answer that I wasn't expecting. And that was God talking to me through that nurse. And I realized at that moment that His word is real. Because that very moment that I was going through this is the verse that popped up out of nowhere on a computer screen. And it gave me hope. It gave me my strength to move forward. You know? So she tells us, before you guys go outside, she goes, I just want to pray for you guys. She goes, I just want to pray for you guys. And she started to pray. And when we sat there and she continued praying for us, emergency rooms are usually very loud. There's a lot of people going in and out. There's a lot of noise, a lot of beeping going on. But at that very moment, my wife and I, we both felt it. And everything got quiet. The whole emergency room, everything got silent for those few minutes that the nurse was praying for us. It was so surreal, like, I can't explain it. It was something that I had never experienced. You know, so we went into that room and we're walking outside and her nurse friend comes in and she's like, oh, I was gonna come and take you home, but she's like, something came up, so I didn't have time to come and pick you up about 10 minutes ago. That's when I realized God is here with me right now. All these things are happening right in front of my eyes. And that's when I really understood what my calling was. And I understood what God wanted to do with me in my life. You know, that day forward, I can honestly say that I stopped worrying. And I stopped being scared. And I stopped being anxious about things. I realized that every single answer that I was looking for was not where I was looking for it. It was actually right in front of me the whole time. I just didn't want to listen to that voice that was right in front of me the whole time. You know, so from there, I started to see God's work in my life. I started to see that my younger children were praising. I started to see that my relationship with my wife changed. I started to see a lot of amazing things happening. Not only that, like I said in the very beginning of this video, I lost my job. I wasn't working. A few weeks later, God gives me a job where I don't even have to drive to it. I can literally work from home. And I'm so grateful for it. You know, I'm grateful for everything that I went through. I think that He had to break the old me to be able to set me free of whatever was holding me down. And I can honestly say the old me died in that hospital that day. It was left them behind, and I'm never looking back again. So for everyone that's probably been wondering where I've been at for the last few months, well, I can only say that I've been getting my relationship better with God. That's it. You know, I feel that I'm ready to take on the world for whatever comes, because that experience made me strong. It also taught me something. It taught me to value every single day of life. I'm happy to say that now I can walk, and when I walk, I give thanks to God for that. I said, thank you, Lord. I'm able to move my legs, something that I wasn't grateful for before. There was a lot of things that I wasn't grateful for, but that's where I've been for the last few months. It's just getting better with God and rebuilding my life. And I think that if you're listening to this and you're watching this, there's always hope and there's always time. If you are listening to it right now, maybe this is your time. This is your time to say to God, please forgive me for everything that I've done, and I open up my heart to you. Because, as you know, a lot of us don't have that opportunity anymore. A lot of us have gone and passed, and we have friends who have passed away. But if you still have life, and you're still breathing, and you're still somehow moving around, or if you're bedbound, you still have an opportunity to turn it all around. So that's my only advice to you guys is, don't wait until it's too late. If you have the opportunity to do it now, do